As John starts talking here when we're going to start videoing, it's pretty cool.
We're
So
talking about dominoes, not.
this is what happens when you help friends and friends come to help you. Usually it makes it worse. So I'm Keith McGowan, the Outboard Dad, and today we're going to work on Sean's outboard motor here on his pontoon boat. We're going to do some maintenance on it. We're going to do water pump, oil change, plugs. We're going to go through everything, make sure everything's ready for the season. So let's get started. So first we're going to start with a little inspection here. We're going to go through the unit. This is a very, very clean outboard because this is up at Lake Wallenpaupack out in PA. So we're going to take a look at the lower unit. We're going to take a look at the oil, make sure it's clean, no water or moisture inside there. And then we're also going to look at our power tilt and trim, make sure the seals are ready to go, make sure there's no breaks in them, make sure there's no leaks in them, and take care of whatever's needed. So let's start with this lower unit. We're going to drop it off and we're going to put it on the table over here and we're going to check the water pump. We do have a new water pump for it. We're going to get this thing apart and get this going. Okay, so for this particular lower unit, what we have is some bolts here. We also have a rubber grommet on the back of it. There's a bolt underneath that. And then we're also going to remove the skeg, and usually there's a bolt underneath that as well. We're also going to remove this prop, make sure there's no fishing line or anything underneath it. This is pretty much used for enjoyment out on the water, not too much fishing, I don't think they do, but we're going to inspect it anyway to make sure there's no fishing line that could be grabbing that seal. We're also going to open up here, make sure there's no algae or anything inside the water passages. So before we move this zinc, we're going to note the position that it's in to make sure it goes back the same way. And then we have our oil tube here. We're going to put some cardboard underneath that so we don't make a mess that we're going to drain our oil out of. Okay, so once we removed the cavitation plate zinc, you see there's a bolt underneath there. And then we have our other 6 bolts on each side. Let's get this apart. So in salt water, that zinc is extremely important because that's going to take all of the corrosion that's going on. They also mount, see there's another zinc here. And see how it has a ground wire going to it? So that's also helping to take all the corrosion away. Right, this way your internal parts, your electronics don't take the corrosion.
Right.
Okay, so we had our water pump casing here. We pulled off 4 bolts. Impeller came out, was in decent shape. If you notice the impeller, it has a keyway on it on one side, but it doesn't go all the way through, so it only goes on one way. And then there's a set of washers we want to reuse that go on top of it. A plastic sleeve, and then a cone to hold the plastic sleeve in place. All these are important so you get proper water flow through your engine. If you miss one of those, you'll get cavitate, you'll get some bubbles in there, and then you'll have an overheat issue. Every so often it'll drive you crazy when you're out on the water, so we got to make sure we do those correctly. Now, John's asking why I put a little bit of WD-40 on each one of these, and I said, well, you have to watch the video in order to find out. So the reason we do that, see I put our washers in, we're going to put our sleeve in now. And the reason I put a little bit of WD-40 on there, I don't really want to use grease because I'm afraid the grease is going to eat away at the rubber. But we're going to spin this shaft clockwise because that's the way it needs to turn inside when we put our casing on top. So we'll put our sleeve on. And we're going to have to tap that into place a little bit with a very specific outboard motor hammer that John says we have to use. We want to make sure this is nice and tight and seals off. So any of the water pump sealers is going to tell you to use this 3M product. This is going to go on an O-ring around. You can also use it in any gaskets so that it's waterproof and sealed. I made sure I cleaned off and dried it off. The O-ring's in great shape. So we're going to apply this and put it in place. If I can get the cap off.
By the way, I'm watching what you do here, so don't think I'm over there. I'm just
That's cool.
so I want to learn how to do this myself.
Right, there was just the 3 washers.
Yeah,
I mean, you take it apart, you put it back together. So you know.
Yeah, I'm watching you do this because
So this is just 3M weather stripping adhesive. Yeah. If you look up like OMC's water pump sealer, this is what they're going to send you. It's the same stuff. You know, you may know it in the auto industry as Gorilla Snots.
Yeah.
Yep.
What about, why not just use silicone?
You could. Then you have to wait for it to dry a little bit.
Okay.
And it doesn't seal as well as this does.
Okay.
Silicone is not as strong. Now, if you've probably used the Ford diesel silicone. You ever use that?
I think that's about the same as the gear oil silicone.
That's what it's for. Yeah, it's for a diesel engine.
Yeah.
And it's also
I have it
used
too
on
here.
gearboxes. It's gray and it dries like really hard.
I have it here.
Yeah. So you could use that as well. I use that like if I have pull ahead and I got a water jacket that's corroded,
You put that in.
clean it up enough so that it's bare metal, and that will do it. And then when I put this on, so I put a little WD-40 on each one of these little points so that I can spin this, because I want to spin it clockwise.
While
So
you
it
put
goes,
this on.
yep. And then you look at this, right? I pulled the cup out, you didn't see, but you're looking to make sure it's not melted around here, right? Because this sets in plastic.
Cool, gotcha.
So when you pull the cup out, if it's melted inside there, that means someone ran it without a hose or something. But you would know it too, because this would be burned up,
Yeah.
you know? It
Absolutely.
only takes a few minutes without water.
Yeah, no, I did it.
How do you think I know? So we're going to use some grease for all the bolt threads. This way we make sure it goes together smoothly and it comes out again next time. All right, so I'm going to grease up these bolts. Just getting a little bit of Mercruiser Extreme grease on there. You can use any grease you like. I like white lithium as well. This is freshwater motor, so pretty much anything is good. Okay, so now what we're going to do is we're going to apply the same grease on our shifter shaft here, and we're also going to do it up here on our spline, and then all the bolt holes that are going in here. We also have a nice little O-ring here. I'm not going to use grease on this O-ring. I'm going to put some white lithium on that because I'm afraid the grease is going to eat away at that O-ring. And what this O-ring does is this seals off for our speedometer. So this is sending water through a small hole in the lower unit here that shoots up and goes through to our speedometer. And I'm also going to put a little grease here because there's a sleeve that this meets up with to hold the shaft straight while we're running. So I have some white lithium here I'm going to use to put on the O-rings and on the rubber parts. This is where our tube connects to shoot our water up into our engine. And I just put a little lube just so it aligns and slips into place. I don't want to cut this rubber and end up with a piece of rubber inside there. Then you have a blockage and it ends up overheating, and then Sean will be calling me when he's out on the water, and I'll have to come out and spend the weekend at his place. Maybe not a bad idea. Okay, so we removed the bottom plug to drain the oil. No moisture at all came out, which is really good. We got nice clean oil coming out of this. And you can see it's just dripping a little bit. I'm going to go ahead and remove the oil vent. That'll let the air in the top, and then the rest of the oil will come out. The other thing we want to check is there's little gaskets that are on these screws. We want to make sure they're good and clean and not broken. If they are, you want to replace them. Okay, so we drained all of our oil out. Now we have this pump that Sean bought, and we're going to insert that into our bottle, and then we're going to pump it up until it comes out our vent hole. We're going to put the screw in so it holds the oil in so no air can get in there, and then we'll quickly change the plug out, put the plug in for this filler. Okay, so we're just about finishing up with our lower unit oil, drained it out, and we're going to put new oil in. Now we have an oil filter here. As you always hear me say, the Outboard did, we always use the manufacturer's oil, the manufacturer's equipment, because it's going to work best in that outboard. Next, we're going to take this cover off and access our spark plugs, and then we're going to change those plugs. We're going to pull out each plug and take a look at them, see how the motor's firing. This way we can kind of tell how well the motor's operating when we're out there on the water, and kind of maybe some direction and some problems we could catch in the future. We're also going to take a little bit of fuel out of his tank. Sean doesn't know that yet. I brought a little jar, and we're going to do a little test. So we're going to do that now because I want the jar to sit for a little while to see what we're pulling into this motor. Sean's got the first plug out. He's taking out the second one. So let's take a look at what we got here. Very clean. Looks like these were done last year. Actually considering putting these back in. So we're going to check each one. If each one of them looks good, we'll save the plugs for next year. Right. So we have an extra fuel filter on the motor here that we're going to replace. There's a canister and there's a filter inside there that we're going to replace. We're going to pump some of this fuel out when we do this and check it and see if there's any moisture in the fuel as well. Okay, so we filled up the oil. We have a nice little oil fill spot. We're going to take this cover off and we're going to check the timing belt that's underneath here, and we're going to check to see if it's not cracked and in good condition. And then we also have another fuel water separator here that we're going to replace. And this filter looks like someone had replaced this, and looks like they put some Teflon tape on there. There's an O-ring up in there that should seal this off. So we're just going to replace this whole part here so that we don't have problems and we can enjoy the summer out on the water.
Should get 'em?
So we topped off our oil, and now we're going to take off this plate here. We're looking to see that this has the thermostat inside there. So there's going to be a gasket around here too. We're going to clean off the surfaces. We have a new gasket for it, and we're going to replace that thermostat that's inside there. Also, as we look at our timing belt here, it looks really nice. We can see this looks like it may have been replaced very recently. And as we look at it closer, we want to make sure there's no cracks. We want to look at the inside to make sure there's no cracking and the ribs are good and everything looks nice and true so that it works properly. It's not loose in any way. Our idler pulley looks good. So it's just an inspection because it's in such good condition. So here's the cover we removed. Took all the bolts out. Gasket's in excellent condition, so we're actually going to reuse it. So here's our thermostat. As we pull it out, it's not in bad shape, but we're going to go ahead and replace it just to be safe. If motors overheat, then we could take a chance of ruining an engine that we have to do a rebuild on, which could be very costly. So we're going to go ahead and pop in a new one, put some sealer around here. I don't see any gasket on this face, so it looks really nice. We actually don't want to sand or scrape this. We want to leave the painted surface because we don't want the aluminum to be bare because that actually causes more corrosion. So we're going to go ahead and seal that up, put a new one on, and we'll be good to go.